Alright everyone, Tuesday the 16th of September show brought to you by Practical CBT, simple support for men's mental health. And today we've got a bit of discussion just following on from Sunday's victory over Kilmarnock. A few different talking points, obviously based on the comments you've been sending in, so we'll go through a number of them. And a couple of other wee things to round up as well. Don't worry, I'm not actually going to cover Russell Martin taking his Rangers players wild swimming and hill walking at Loch Lomond yesterday. We'll do that later in the week when Stevie's on, because he's a bit of an expert in all things Rangers. Only joking. Let's batter into your comments. Oh, and we start with the viewer, GigPod5785. And it's about Celtic. Wow. Would be resting a lot of the team for the Thistle game, certainly in the midfield. Bernardo has to start, should be able to get through that game with minimal fuss, no matter who we start anyway. Midfield is going to be an issue for Red Star and Hibs unless there is a serious improvement. Yep, going through your comments, the vast majority, I say 80% or more, were centred around the centre of the park, and clearly a lot of people not happy with how things are going in the midfield. I feel the same. I don't think anyone could be watching that midfield and think things are functioning fine at the moment. We had Josh saying the midfield is not working and needs a rework. I would bench the three usual starters for the Partick game. The team is yet to give us a convincing 90 minutes this season apart from Falkirk in the Cup. We've also got John Watt. Good win, but yet again the midfield is poor. When's the last time our midfield controlled a game and bossed it? The balance of the midfielders is wrong and we've got too many similar players. Yeah, I do think it's a bit of a tricky place that we find ourselves in with our midfield at the moment. I don't think any of them are performing particularly well, yet they all kind of seem a bit undroppable at the moment, and it certainly seems like when a big game comes around that Brendan Rodgers will go back to them. And like that would, even if, changes are made for Firhill on Saturday, my concern would be when we get to the big one, or a bigger one against Belgrade, a week tomorrow, we'd probably see the same midfield of McGregor, Nygren and Hatate back in. And that is a concern to me. You've got Arnie Engels, who I know is not everyone's cup of tea, but he couldn't even get any game time, couldn't get off the bench against Kilmarnock on Sunday. I think more to the point, Paulo Bernardo. I mean, I was counting up Paulo Bernardo's minutes he's played this season. It didn't take me too long because he's made a total of 2 appearances all season competitively and 72 minutes on the pitch. Connor McKenzie got in touch saying Bernardo getting not even a few minutes off the bench is really starting to piss me off. He wasn't exactly like a first choice last season or at any point during his Celtic career consistently so far. But he was still featuring in a lot of games. Like, he started the Scottish Cup final end of last season when Real Hatate obviously wasn't available for that one. So for him to kind of drop off from that level to now clearly become our 6th choice midfielder who we barely ever see, especially when the midfield that's playing in front of him is really struggling and have been struggling for a number of weeks, I think is a concern, and it does kind of leave you scratching your head a little bit and maybe even speculating, has something happened with Paulo Bernardo over the summer, that Brendan Rodgers has potentially looked at and thought, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of you anymore. Like, and this is totally speculation from my part, make that totally clear, has Bernardo been looking at other options and intimated that he's wanted to leave the club? Because I do find it bizarre that he's not getting any real opportunities for us. The manager was asked about Paulo Bernardo's game time around about a month ago, and he gave a bit of an unconvincing answer, I think, at that point. He said, it's a very competitive squad. He's one of a number of good players that we have in the area, and sometimes how it works in football, the ones that aren't playing, you get asked, and then it switches about. I think once you get them into Europe, you need every player. Paulo's a very talented player, and he's one of a number of talented players in midfield. But it's not just a Bernardo issue. I think, the players that are starting at the moment, I just feel like that midfield really is lacking like dynamism at the moment. It's lacking speed. Just seems very safe. Benji Nygren, I think, has done some good things for us since signing. I don't think he's been a total disaster. And, you know, he is still relatively newly in the door, so you still do hold out hope for him. I think we kind of knew when we just watched some clips of him at Nordsjælland and whoever else, we knew that he wasn't going to be a quick player. But I was kind of hoping for a bit more creativity and a bit more influence on matches. It's not just his fault, though, in that midfield. Like, Reo Hatate, to me, is... to be honest, I'm kind of struggling to say much about Reo Hatate because I'm watching games pass him by. I'm watching games and I'm actually forgetting at times that Hatate is playing. And that's so far away from, you know, where Hatate has been for us for the majority of his Celtic career. You know, impacting things, trying things. At times, being frustrating because he's so prominent and making mistakes. At the moment, I feel like we're not even getting that. Callum McGregor stuff, I'm kind of less sure on. I don't think McGregor's playing as badly as the two in front of him, and part of me's thinking, you know, if you put a couple of better players or more informed players in front of McGregor, do you see a bit more from him? But to Stevie's initial point, I would not be against the idea of rotating that entire midfield three for Partick Thistle on Saturday. I know there's question marks over all of these players. I'm not going to, you know, become one of these people who make someone who's sitting on the bench and we're not seeing turn into like our best player. Like, Paulo Bernardo has his faults. I think at times you could say the same thing that you've said about Nygren, about someone like Bernardo. He lacks a bit of urgency. Arnie Engels started just a couple of weeks ago, got that big chance to start at Ibrox, and he was like awful in that game. So he didn't take that opportunity. And, you know, Luke McCowan, I like Luke McCowan, but I think there's clearly arguments over whether he's a starting Celtic centre mid. So it's a bit of a tough one to work out what to do here. The other one I would just throw into the mix, and I think it's something Asim mentioned yesterday, is Michel Ange Balikwisha, who, you know, is very much viewed as a winger, and I think has mainly been a winger throughout his career, although he's not looked like a winger really in either of his first couple of games for us. But I was just looking back at like where he's played in recent times, and actually at the start of this season for Antwerp, he played a fair amount of his game time more centrally. So Antwerp play a kind of 5-3-2 or a 3-5-2, and they tend to get their width from their fullbacks, and that had led to Balikwisha playing more centrally for them at the start of this season. And I'm kind of looking at his strengths, and like, I don't think he's massively quick. I think he's, you know, quite a technical player, can do 1-2s and good first touch. I think he presses the game pretty well. That's something we heard from, you know, the guys that we had on our Insight on Balikwisha video. So I'm just wondering if he could be a potential solution to this midfield problem and the midfield going a bit stale. Could we play Balikwisha in one of those attacking roles? I guess you'd then have to question, you know, what happens on the right wing. Great work recruitment team. Loads of options on the right wing. At least we didn't sign about 4 different left wingers and no right wingers. Potentially Dyson could play out there. I know he played there under Ange a little bit when it was Jota was playing on the left. So maybe you have some sort of Tounekti left, Maida right, Iheanacho striker, and then, like, for example, maybe Balikwisha, Engels, McGregor type thing. Kind of brainstorming at the moment, but I think my main point is here, like, looking at that midfield especially, something has to be changed here. I think looking at positives, and JG got in touch saying hopefully a catalyst for improved form, talking about Sunday's win. Tounekti was as good as I thought he would be from his clips. Balikwisha looked exactly like his clips too. Poor, hard to believe we have been after him for a year. Sums up recruitment. And I do think there were some positives to be taken away from Sunday. Like, I thought Sebastian Tounekti looked really, really lively. I thought he looked talented. He looked like he had the creativity we've badly lacked in recent weeks, the speed we've badly lacked. To be honest, he looked like he had everything we have badly lacked in recent weeks. And again, the point I'm making, like, it sometimes just takes one really bright spark in a kind of pretty poor team at the moment to really get everyone going and to kind of drag everyone along with them. I always remember back years ago, we were in a bit of a tough spot. can't remember exactly what season, was it 1920 under Neil Lennon, and he introduced Jeremy Frimpong into things, and Frimpong just completely lifted everyone's spirits because he was like this infectious character, and just, you know, in terms of on the pitch, he dragged everyone forward, and you were getting excited watching him, and it felt like the teammates were getting a bit of a buzz from all of that. So hopefully Tounekti can just be what we needed at the right time. Potentially Iheanacho can be that as well. I mean, that was a huge moment for him getting that goal. I'm already excited to watch Tounekti against Partick Thistle at the weekend and against Belgrade next week. I'm also excited to see Iheanacho and how he can build on that. And if we can just maybe have one or two other, you know, bright sparks there, if Balikwisha can somehow just settle in and show the quality he has, because he must have some sort of quality. Antwerp fans, you know, I'd say we're fairly positive about him coming to the club. And, you know, someone else in that team, I think there are positives there. You just maybe need to look for them a little bit at the moment. Just on Iheanacho, some good comments from him, I think, after the game on Sunday. Asked by the media about not coming to Celtic in January, says he was, quote, keen to put that aside and move on to the future. He reckons that the goal he scored will give him confidence. He spoke about needing to be strong mentally after a tough year. But I feel like that wasn't ever like my concern with Iheanacho. I think my concern with Iheanacho, and it's still a little bit of a concern, is, you know, like, does he actually really fancy Celtic? Has he got the bit between his teeth to go and say, I've had a really bad year, I'm going to go and make this right and be a bit of a star? There's been plenty of examples in the past of players who were struggling a bit in their careers, come to Celtic and light it up and become huge fan favourites. I did mention Scott Sinclair, who's probably a bit of a different situation to Iheanacho, but someone who'd worked with Brendan Rodgers in the past, had great success, and was possibly just looking to kind of find that man again who could get the best out of him. And Brendan Rodgers did that with Scott Sinclair. So hopefully we're seeing the same thing with Iheanacho. I think he deserves huge credit for stepping up and taking that penalty, but more than that, I think he deserves huge credit for taking it so confidently. That's the thing that kind of gives me the most belief about Iheanacho coming away from that. It was the fact that it was a really confident penalty, and what was a pretty nervous moment, certainly for all of us. Who knows if Iheanacho was nervous, if he's that kind of guy. He certainly didn't show it. But again, if somehow that moment can just kind of act as a catalyst for him, and he can become a guy against all the odds who can turn into a real goal scorer for us, then that's, you know, things are really starting to look up for us. That's kind of what I'm clinging on to at the moment. Just a final story I want to tell you about today, and it concerns international breaks and a slight change that's coming to them from next season. So at the moment, we get 5 international breaks per year. So you get one in March, one in June, and then you have these really frustrating consecutive month ones at the start of the league season, September, October and November. And I just feel like they really disrupt the start of the club season. They're a bit of a pain. However, from next year, FIFA will slightly improve the situation by merging the September and October breaks into one longer break in September. So that break will last 3 weeks, and there'll be 4 international matches squeezed into that period, rather than obviously like the 2 international matches per break that we get at the moment. So it means that we'll have a 3-week break from Celtic this time next year, roughly, 21st of September to the 6th of October, but we'll then be able to run all the way through until mid-November. Personally, and I've said this before, I think, on the channel, my ideal scenario would be having like 2 international breaks per year, having one in November and one in March, and you split like all of your international matches for that year between those 2 breaks. Obviously, I'm not talking about World Cups and stuff; they'll still happen in the summer, but I just think that makes like so much more sense from a club point of view. Having these constant interruptions, 3 different international breaks in the first 3 or 4 months of the season, is just, it's just a pain. It feels so stop-start. I think from an international point of view as well, it's probably a bit stop-start. Surely you'd be better squeezing like these 6 Scotland games at the start of this season into one break. You can pick up momentum. As a kind of partial Scotland watcher, I think I'd probably enjoy that a bit more as well, because it'd be like, right, Scotland have played one game, we've got 5 to go. Are they going to qualify for the World Cup? You'd have just a kind of fast run of matches to do it. And obviously from kind of travel point of view as well, I think reading into it, it might be one of the main reasons for this change happening. Like, for example, Daisen Maeda probably next year, if he's still with us, that is, only having to fly to Japan twice at the start of the season rather than 3 times as it would be in the current situation. So positive steps taken by FIFA. Hopefully, just a step towards a couple of international breaks, or even one international break per year. Let's go the whole hog and get this in. But at least next year we won't have quite as many international breaks to get through and bring out dated content on the channel. I'd never do that. Okay, going ahead, everyone. Back tomorrow.